Ready to go, Chairman, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call our meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 15th regular meeting of the Commission to End Homelessness. We will all stand. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good afternoon again. We are without a chairman today because Doug Chafee, who has been our chairman, is no longer a member of the commission. And we'll get to some of that later, but I'm Richard Afable as your vice chair. I will chair this meeting. And again, I want to thank each of you for being here. The agenda for today contains a brief description of each item to be considered. Except as provided by law, no action shall be taken on any item not appearing on the agenda. The Commission to End Homelessness encourages public participation. If you wish to speak on any item appearing on the agenda or during general comments, please complete a speaker request form, turn it into the clerk prior to the reading of the item. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will run the timer and announce when your time is up. Public comment may also be submitted electronically by emailing response@ocgov.com. Response@ocgov.com. With that, we will move to the roll call. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chairman. And just a housekeeping item, as a reminder, please be aware that the room is mic'd and hot mic for the live stream of the meeting. So please try to keep side conversations to a minimum as they may be picked up by the microphone. So please indicate your presence when I call your name. Supervisor Sarmiento.
Here.
Supervisor Wagner.
Here.
Jim Vanderpool. Scott Stiles.
Here.
Deborah Rose. Sue Parks.
Here.
Robert Dunn.
Here.
John D. Metropolis.
Here.
Christy Cornwall. Nursan Kistan. Monique Davis. Jack Twan.
Here.
AJ Patella.
Here.
Todd Spitzer.
Here.
George Searcy.
Here.
Dr. Afable.
Here.
Paul Wyatt.
Here.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have a quorum present.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We will now move to the agenda for today's items. I will begin with our discussion items. Madam Clerk, will you please read the first item?
So item 1 is the Office of Care Coordination update, which includes updates on membership, cold weather emergency shelter, homeless service system pillars report, and request for proposals. And we have no requests from the public to speak on this item.
I'd like to welcome our new members to the Commission to End Homelessness, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Doug, would you please provide an update for us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Afable. So good afternoon, everyone. Doug Best, Director of the Office of Care Coordination. It's great to see everyone. So the first update in our Office of Care Coordination update is about membership. So as already mentioned, Supervisor Chafee has rolled off of this commission, and I just wanted to take a second to thank him for his time and his leadership. As all of you know, he was our chairman for roughly the last year, a little bit over the last year. It's really helped shepherd us through our pillars report and the creation of that. A lot of transition in membership. We just really appreciate his leadership. So I wanted to take a second to thank him. Additionally, we have a handful of other membership changes, and I wanted to point that out and also give people an opportunity to introduce themselves to the group. First, as you may have noticed, the Supervisor Chafee's replacement is Supervisor Sarmiento of the 2nd District. Supervisor, it's great to have you. I want to give you a second to.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Doug. I see a lot of familiar faces in this room, so that's either good or bad. I'm not sure. Just kidding. I'm 5.5 weeks new to this role, so I'm really glad to be here with all of you. I hope to learn a lot from you as well. For those of you who don't know me, I was a former mayor of Santa Ana, so it's good to have a presence from a city that's been impacted, obviously, by people who experience homelessness. So hopefully I'll bring a different lens that will help this conversation and move the effort that you all have started already and forward. It's good to see you, Monique. So with that, I'll be doing a lot of listening for the first part.
Thank you so much. Perfect transition. We're really happy to have Miss Monique Davis here with us and as the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Orange County. And I want to give you also an opportunity to introduce yourself to the group.
I'm really glad to be here. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a fairly new CEO to Habitat. I've officially hit my 9-month mark. So I'm new in the role, but I'm not new to affordable housing. I've been a houser, whether on the housing finance side, most of my career, or in homelessness. And I've worked in LA County. Don't hold that against me, but I've worked in LA County in providing housing and supportive services for folks that are experiencing homelessness. But I've been a longtime resident of Orange County. And so I've raised my children with my husband here. And so I'm just really happy to be here and joining all of you to help, bring some solutions to this challenge. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then lastly, we have, some sad news. One of our commissioners who's been with us for quite some time is moving on. City manager of Garden Grove, Mr. Scott Stiles. I want to give you a second to.
Thank you, Doug. Very bittersweet day for me. I've been appointed the city manager out in Palm Springs, so I'm going to be starting there on March 6th. I want to personally thank Supervisor Doe, who originally appointed me to this to the commission. I also want to personally thank all the Board of Supervisors for their support of the Navigation Center that our central cities have recently gotten off the board. I've learned a lot from being on this commission, and so recently Garden Grove and Westminster and Fountain Valley, we've all come together to try and be a part of the overall solution. And we've put all the funding together, all the agreements of the 3 cities together to open a navigation center. Our RFP for the build out of the facility will be in a week and a half. We're right on target to open the facility before the end of the year. It'll be about 85 beds, and we think it'll be a nice, another building block that we can all use to move forward. So, between the Navigation Center, second city out of the gate working with the Be Well, a mobile mental health group. So, it's kind of been a continuation of care that we've tried to, put together in our city and work with the other cities around us. So I've learned a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on this commission, and I want to wish everybody well, and I'll be calling. I do want to really thank Frank Kim, Doug Beck, and all their staff for helping us get to this point. Doug's been terrific in advising us, helping us do this in the right way. So we're doing it efficiently, effectively, and getting stuff done. So Doug, thank you to you and Frank. We greatly appreciate your help.
Yeah, you've been on the commission for a couple of years now, and I really appreciate your membership. Definitely bittersweet. Palm Springs is lucky, but yeah, thank you so much. So the second discussion item is our cold weather shelter. So as we met 2 months ago, we were still working on developing a cold weather shelter. Fortunately, as we sit here today, and to great thanks of one of our commissioners, Chief Dunn, and I'll ask him to speak in a minute. There is a cold weather shelter operating in the city of Fullerton at the moment. So just to give a little bit of a context and how we got here, on January 17th, the city of Fullerton unanimously approved the ability to negotiate utilization of their Independence Park Gymnasium on Valencia to allow the county to utilize it as a cold weather shelter. Then about a week later, the Board of Supervisors approved the contract with Path People Assisting the Homeless as the operator of the cold weather shelter, and also approved the license agreement that allows us to utilize the space of the cold weather shelter. It opened on February 1st, and it will stay open till March 31st. It's 90 beds. Our occupancy each night has increased from the start. Last night, we saw 83 individuals utilize the facility. It's a 90-bed max. People assisting the homeless, we appreciate them stepping up. They provide food management, security, and general operations. As many of you may know, this is a real emergency respite site that allows people to come in each night out in cold weather. We utilize this opportunity to hopefully leverage them coming in to connect them to more long-term services. We have a path working with our social services office, with our healthcare agency, and with other groups to ensure that if folks are interested in services, they are connected to those services. They also provide a warm meal when they come in at night, and a bag breakfast as they leave in the morning. Yeah, this is we have been operating the cold weather shelter for, I think, about 15 years now, especially in the last 7-8 years as the county and the cities and our provider agencies have built up our system of care. The shelters have come on board. We're lucky to have a greater capacity that is not just an emergency capacity in the winter, that really focuses on getting people connected to permanent housing and the services they need. But the cold weather shelter is still a vital piece of our system, and one that serves a unique population and is really an entryway for some folks into addressing long-term issues. With that being said, like I said, Chief Dunn, specifically from the city of Fullerton, has been instrumental and really is the one who reached out and inquired about where we were, and we discussed and asked about the utilization of this space. And basically, from that moment on, the chief and his staff and the city of Fullerton have been outstanding partners, and their sole interest has been helping the folks we're trying to serve. So thank you, Chief Dunn. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I would just say we found the county to be a great partner too. If anybody is, entertaining doing this next year, and I think you should, the county is always there to be a partner with us and listens very much to the feedback. We had run a facility in this park during the pandemic. As you remember, the governor closed access to the armories, and for decades Fullerton hosted at the armory, and so we pivoted to this location, so we're familiar with it. But what was different this time is all the other park services are open. And so I know there's been a couple calls between me and Doug at night, stuff trying to fine tune the operation, and every time it's gone seamlessly. So we appreciate it. And there's only one other bit of context I would provide for those who watch and some feedback I got from our community. If you're comparing this operation to that of which an armory operation is, it is not that. A lot of people look at armory operations and say that is not sheltered. If you look at how they're run, they have to set them up very quickly and tear them down very quickly. At this facility, they have more permanent beds. It's more comfortable, more inviting for folks. And so I think this is a good step in the right direction. And hopefully the people that are watching from Fullerton, that answers your questions that you send to me quite frequently. So it's a much nicer location for our homeless neighbors to come and receive services. So thank you.
As folks walked in the many flyers we have on the table, we do have two critical flyers here that provide information around the pickup location and hours of operation. This particular flyer, and then you'll see one with the QR code. That you can scan. You scan the QR code and you get the same information. So yes, yeah. Thanks so much, Chief Dunn.
I just have a question, Chief. Can they stay if they want to stay for, do they have to re-enroll every day, or how does that work?
Yes, one of the security measures as far as assuaging the concerns of the nearby community is that when you check in, you come in via shuttle. And when you leave in the morning, you leave via shuttle. It also, because we're still sort of in COVID protocols, as well as some of the clients that come in are not feeling well, and we've had to have them avail themselves of medical services. There is a need to do a deep cleaning every day after people transition through. And so this gives that space and time. So it opens about 5 p.m. and the shuttle pickups start about 4:45 at 2 locations in Fullerton. Then at 7 a.m. the bus leaves and takes you back to one of those 2 locations. So they utilize that time to kind of get everything ready for the nights. And we're tracking, Fullerton is tracking all of this data, how many times people are coming repeatedly. Do we have someone meet that threshold that they're going into more long-term services? What cities are they coming from and how are they finding out about the location to see? So next year, as the county crafts their RFP for this type of service, we can give them the data that they need maybe to direct their RFP service.
Yeah, and to answer your question, if someone is interested in staying, that's where we sort of jump in and say, hey, listen, we have a bed at Bridges or Placentia or Buena Park that provides you the ability to stay, get the wraparound services that we think you need. And that's sort of the foot in the door in that transition.
And that's why PATH was a great partner to identify in this process, because PATH does run the Placentia Navigation Center. So they're kind of locked into or linked into the North Spas network there, and they can get them services more quickly.
Oh, thank you. I was just curious, if somebody's in another part of the county, is there transportation provided for getting somebody there, or how does that work?
There's 2 specific pickup locations in the city of Fullerton, and our focus is, picking those people up from those.
Okay, so they need to get to those 2 spots, wherever else they are in the county, and from those 2 spots.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, people who want to utilize the site, the pickup locations are the place where they would get picked up.
Any other questions?
Well, just more comment, thank you, Chief. And I think I said this may have been my first board meeting, but I just wanted to thank you and your city council and your residents for stepping up, because I know it's always tricky. I mean, as you were saying, Fullerton and St. Anna have historically been the 2 sites for the cold weather shelters at both armories. So it is something that was necessary. I think that, maybe for this commission and for those of us on board, just to make sure we get ahead of this, because we know it takes a while to, find a location right now that we don't have a fixed one. So that's something I think hopefully we all can talk about. Accessibility, making sure that people from other areas outside of Fullerton can take advantage of that, especially having, this past season been so wet and cold. So to that extent, the sooner we can tackle this, and maybe it's on a rotating basis. I don't know, maybe, others step up to do the same thing to make sure that we cover the entire region. But I just wanted to say, thank you all, and thank you for your leadership and, bringing it forward.
That's what I'm finding.
Thank you. It takes a lot of people to do it.
Great. So really quickly, our last 2 updates, the homeless service system pillar report. So as always, we are, use this developed framework by this particular group to help drive the discussion where we're going. Our office continues to work with our procurement team and our different county departments to create a structure that ensures that in the near future, any contract or program that is goes in front of the board that fits into these pillars are abiding by our guiding principles and practices. So we continue to work on that and impact future needs. Lastly, we wanted to use this opportunity to advertise our office as an open request for proposal at the moment for a homeless point in time count professional services. So essentially to be the project lead in implementing and planning the point in time count with our office and the continuum of care. The focus here is, I know, we're in February of 2023, but this request for proposal is seeking a contract for next fiscal year and looking at specifically conducting the 2024 point in time count. You can see on here the bid number, and the bid ends and closes on March 2nd at 2 p.m. So, yeah. Qualified vendors for that. And with that, I'll hand it back to the.
Okay. Any questions of Doug from the commissioners? Okay, hearing none, let's move to our presentation portion of the agenda. Madam Clerk, would you read the next item?
Yes, item 2 under presentation items is the 2022 housing funding strategy update by Julia Bidwell and Michelle Zadiba, UC Community Resources, Housing and Community Development. And we have no requests from the public to speak on this item.
Thank you. Doug, would you make an introduction, please?
Absolutely. So we're really excited to have Julia Bidwell, the Director of Housing and Community Development at the OC Community Resources, here to present an update on the housing funding strategy. Many of you heard is, this is much more than what I'm about to associate it with, and Julia will get into this, but to give a little bit of reference, I think the piece that's most associated with this particular strategy is the number that has previously been set, the 2,700 units, the goal. So this is an update to that plan, and we're excited for Julia to present and have a discussion about it. So, yeah, take a look.
All right, thank you, Doug, and thank you, commission members. Again, my name is Julia Bidwell. I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development for the County of Orange. I've had the honor and privilege of working for the county for 23 years, so all in housing. So I'm very excited to give you the update on the 2022 housing funding strategy update. I think I'm supposed to work this. There we go. So by way of background, we had a 2018 housing funding strategy. It was created as a regional plan based on the 2017 point in time count. It identified the need for the development of 2,700 units of supportive housing, again, based on the 2017 point in time count. And also it identified the financial resources and gaps to achieve that goal. So the 2022 housing funding strategy update is based on the most recent point in time, the 2022 point in time count. It provides a progress report on the 2,700 units, and I'll get to that in a moment. A revised housing unit goal for 2029, again, based on the new point in time count numbers and the needs there, and recommendations for an updated strategic approach. And that's Buena Esperanza. It's a collaborative between the city of Anaheim and us before there was ever a home key. City of Anaheim converted a motel. The progress report. So currently, and the number continues to grow, there's 1,643 supportive housing units projected to be produced by 2025. So we have the number of units completed, under construction, in financing, and this is as of the time of the report in December. And then we have a projection of those units to be completed by 2025. There was a gap of 1,057 supportive housing units still needed to achieve that goal. However, we now have the 2024 point in time count numbers to rely upon. So if we look at some of the factors affecting the progress, there's actually some factors that are positive and some factors that are negative. One of the positives is the capital funding for supportive housing development has substantially increased. There's more investment from the state of California, local governments, the federal government around this issue of developing supportive housing. However, there have been increased costs of housing construction due to COVID-19, supply chain issues and related delays, staffing shortages, and inflation. What we couldn't anticipate was the magnitude of such a cost increase. So it was unanticipated. It's greatly impacted our supportive housing pipeline and limited production. So there are some factors that are market factors outside of our control on how much the units are costing. There are delays in timing, which cost money. There was an example, and I know Milo knows this. We have a modular housing development, Casa Paloma and Midway City. And you can develop quicker to an extent with modular housing, but if you cannot get the electrical hookup from SoCal Edison based on them getting the transformers from China, you can't open the housing. So there's many different factors going on, not just with the cost, but in timing and supply chain issues. Some of that had an impact on the last 2018 and the goal of building 2,700 by 2025. So that's where we've been. So the updated unit goal, the 2022 housing funding strategy update calls for 2,396 units of supportive housing by 2029, based on the 2022 point in time count. So it's unique. The 2017 point in time count had unique individuals in need of supportive housing, and that's chronically homeless individuals. Now we have the 2022 point in time count. Again, it's telling us uniquely, they're not compounding on one another. Individuals that need supportive housing. The 2,396 does take into account the pipeline though, however. There is a greater number in the point in time count of chronically homeless individuals than this number reflects because of the units that we have already built in the system. So, and these numbers are also a subset of the units already included in the region's regional housing needs assessment numbers that are being incorporated into city and county housing elements. It's not on top of those numbers. It's just a subset of those RHNA numbers. So the current projections to complete this in funding terms and the funding gaps is 458 million in capital. That's the gap, not the total needed. And operating subsidies, which most people think of as project-based vouchers, is the largest operating or rental subsidy for projects. There's a gap of 495 million and 350 million in ongoing supportive services to support these 2,396 units. So taking a look at what the recommendations are. First one is maximize competitiveness for funding by aligning local flexible resource commitments. Unfortunately, not all the funding available for supportive housing, we have gaps in systems, but the funding that is available is also competitive by nature, a lot of it from the state of California. I like to ask this question, and I've taught as an adjunct professor in housing. And let's see if any of you have know this, but who is the largest funder of affordable housing? Any idea? Who is the largest funder? A lot of people like to say HUD, or maybe the state of California. It's actually the Internal Revenue Service. The low-income housing tax credit, which offers a credit to private investment for the development of supportive housing, Section 42 under the IRS code, allowing for that tax credit and tax exemption. Actually, is the greatest funding that we have. Unfortunately, it still is, does not meet the needs of the funding that we need. So just a little tidbit there. So more of the recommendations: dedicate additional funding and continue to refine policy to maximize developers' ability to attract investors. Maximize ability to use all vouchers for project basing up to the caps allowed for the available tenant-based vouchers. We have 4 housing authorities in the county. Continue investments in the Orange County Housing Finance Trust. Explore permanent local housing allocation funding. This was what was SB2 funding, or a recording fee on each recording that comes to jurisdictions for a local source of funding. It's called the permanent local housing allocation. So explore the use of that, investing in housing production. It is a choice. Cities who receive this money actually have an a la carte menu on where to utilize those LHA funding sources. And one of those can be supportive housing investment. Prioritize supportive housing for people experiencing chronic homelessness and design and invest in supportive housing resources for special populations. Build partnerships with mainstream supportive services, including CalOptima. We've had several discussions with CalOptima on some of their new funding sources that can be used for supportive housing. Build on collaborative regional investments in supportive housing development and pursue expanded coordinated funding structure. And last, and to the credit of your OC care coordination team, we incorporated this into our recommendations, is incorporating the housing pillar commitments included in the homeless systems pillars report. So that's a brief overview of the housing funding strategy. I know that you each were given a copy of it, which has much greater detail. I seem to be going backwards on this. But if you have any questions.
Well, yeah, a couple of questions just to clarify. So 2,700 supportive housing, additional supportive housing units that you're reporting on, and we tracked pretty carefully. I mean, as you have that same recommendation included 2,700 units of affordable housing beyond the supported housing. Does anybody sort of monitor and track that other the progress on the other 2,700 that were recommended in that report?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It isn't tracked under the housing funding strategy, but we have a partnership with the Housing Finance Trust. Every other month, we update pipeline numbers and we contact all the cities who may have funding. Anaheim, Santa Ana, Garden Grove have funding where they can actually, and housing authorities, where they might be able to do a project without any county funding. And we make sure that we coordinate with them. We put all of the units on the website of the Housing Funding Trust. And that includes all the affordable units as well as the permanent supportive housing units. So if you go to ochft.org and their developments page, you'll see all of them.
Okay, terrific. And then the unit counts that you, just to make sure I understood, when you said there was now 2,396. I think I understood you to say that excludes the pipeline that's underway. That's beyond the current pipeline.
Right. So that is, this is the new point in time count number and the needs. And so that is a unique number, right? It's not 2,700 plus 2,396.
Okay, thank you. But it does include what's under, that is, it assumes that what's in progress will be built.
It's assumed, yes,
And then it needs 2,396 beyond that.
that's right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Correct.
Well, wouldn't that number then be more than 2,700?
No, the 2,700 was based on the needs of the chronically homeless in the point in time count at that time.
That's all.
So now that we have the updated numbers from the 2022, we know that there's 2,396 for those individuals that are chronically homeless in that count. And it's actually greater because we've deducted what we've already completed for supportive housing.
Okay, so the need as of now, based on 2022 going forward, 2,396.
That's correct.
We're just resetting the need because what has been produced has met a need.
That's right.
And
Oh, I think the chairman wanted to.
oh, let's go with that. And then
Julia, aren't there different, I'm on page, just your shortfalls. Going forward with me, aren't there different analyses for capital shortfall, operating subsidies and supported? as to why, I mean,
Right.
what are the different explanations? I mean, operating subsidies. You knew what your operating subsidies were gonna be, so what is the big factor that's driving up that shortfall?
Right, so operating subsidies may be a project-based voucher, right? This is paying a rental subsidy. So an individual that we are creating this housing for is assumed to pay 30% of their rent. So that income to the project can't support the project. So that's a subsidy to the project. There's only really two things that can provide that funding. Either it's a project-based voucher from a housing authority, where they tie the voucher to the project as opposed to tenant-based, where the individual is qualified, they get the voucher and then they just go shop to market with their voucher. So the project-based voucher is one of the limitations. You can also have a capitalized operating subsidy reserve. And we're actually recommending to do that as part of our recommendations to the Board of Supervisors with our new notice of funding availability, which is to set money aside that acts like a reserve for a project for this subsidy that's required on the project. So where the gap comes in is that the housing authorities don't have enough funding to allocate all the vouchers they've been allocated by the federal government. And so we have a shortfall of available rental subsidies to project base. And that's where we get the gap.
When all is said and done, the number of housing units you anticipate either having built or need to be built, divided by the amount of funding to build that housing. What is the per unit cost in Orange County to build a unit?
Well, the per unit cost right now, and the report has the assumption of, 550,000 was our average coming out of that. fund.
Per house, low income housing unit?
That's right.
And what was LA, when they did their $1 billion bond, what did LA get criticized? What was their cost per unit? About 500,000 per unit, right?
Right.
800 was, Susan, I don't know.
Yeah, the projects, the 550 has been the average. So that means some of the projects are running $700,000 a unit.
Okay. I have a real problem with that. And I think the public does too. When I look at these units, your pictures, this looks like mainstream Irvine housing when you drive down Sand Canyon, right? At the Great Park. How do you're the expert, I'm not, but how does one justify that expense to locate housing? I mean, where is this assumption that the housing has to be in Orange County where housing is so unaffordable? How does one justify $500,000 a unit? There's people who are making $150,000 a year, working full-time with college educations who cannot afford a $500,000 home. So the reason I asked you per unit cost is because I think we are creating a huge disconnect. And we are apt to lose the public support to continue to subsidize the biggest transfers when the housing we're building for low income is exceeding the cost of people who are working every single day to bust their butt to pay for a house. Can you put something? It's like the cold with the shelter. I think we should, and I argued this, you weren't here last meeting. We should be the champions and advocates in our communities for housing. It's very hard to justify to the average person that we are going to build a $500,000 home for somebody.
Right. So some of it has to do with just the cost of development right now. So part of that is that 70% of the development costs are impacted by market forces and conditions beyond any developer or other person's control. The other thing about investing in multifamily housing is that we're a piece of an investment. When you have a single family home, you're financing that at $500,000 a pop. The investment that we have had in the county has been pretty good leveraging. So we are leveraging additional resources. We're not paying $500,000 a unit as one single entity. There's obviously a group and a leveraging that goes on. So every dollar, for instance, the county's put in, it's developed 8 units for that dollar. So the cost of the unit though is $500,000, and part of that's just the cost. The other is the federal and other programs, but the funding it's a choice program. We're required to offer choice in our housing choice voucher program, the Section 8 program. Everybody has an opportunity to live and work where they want to within these programs. So part of that's also the factors that cities and counties have with their regional housing needs assessment numbers that have been adopted by the state. Again, this is a subset of those numbers that have been adopted based on what is the need in Orange County for individuals who are at all levels of income. They're supposed to be a build out. So that we know at the county, when we look at our progress reports, we're exceeding the above market on our arena. But we have a challenge in developing these extremely low income units for those that are homeless. So there's a combination of costs. The other thing that these individuals need, because we're talking about permanent supportive housing, is wraparound services. So some of those are just costs that you have in being able to provide a decent, a supportive environment for those individuals, right? Well, I'm not talking about all affordable housing here. I'm talking about permanent supportive housing. So there's just costs. You can talk to any developer. It'll cost you more to build 20 units because of cost efficiency. That's the other issue. If we could find land and availability that will build 200 units a pop, I'll get your TDC per unit down because I'm spreading the cost over a greater number of units. But what we have is smaller site sizes as well. We're also relying on HomeKey. I know that HomeKey is a great and tremendous benefit, but it's only one housing type. And it's really limited to the footprint of rehabbing that motel. And usually those are smaller opportunities. They're not a great number of units opportunities. So we have a cost efficiency issue. We have an increasing cost issue. That's part of the equation of why, and then regulations. You all know this, if you're in government, affordable housing itself is required to any of the low-income housing tax credit programs, any of the funding sources that we go get have a series of regulations that need to be met above and beyond any market rate project. So those are just some of the highlights of why this is costing so much.
Yeah, I just, last sentence, it might be a long one, but try to make it for the period. The answer when you have a gap as big as this, $1.5 billion, is not to say government give us more money. Okay, it's to figure out where you can build this housing to still keep it affordable to both the taxpayer and the community. And what's going to happen is, that's another sentence, sorry, or maybe it's semicolon, is we're going to lose public support when these numbers get out there. These numbers are not justifiable. They're not. When people are struggling and losing their houses and interest rates are off the chart, it's not. And that's my biggest concern. It's hard to be a champion for this kind of housing when you're spending this much money, you have a shortfall of this great, and then you say the answer is in your bullets, ask for more money. I just think it's a recipe that doesn't lend itself necessarily to success. Not you, Joe. I've known you for 20 years. It has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with the public policy decision. That's all.
Well, pick up on it. Part of the problem is it costs so much because it looks like that. And if it doesn't look like that, the neighbors are going to squawk. If it doesn't look like that, the activists are going to say, I can't put somebody there. And there needs to be a rethinking of what is acceptable for this low income housing. And, you know, it's not a place, to my mind, where folks are supposed to spend the next 30 productive years of their lives and raise families. It's the entry into the system as we move them forward. And sometimes that gets lost. And I do need to push back a little bit, Julia. You know, the idea that the IRS is the biggest funder of affordable housing. I think fundamentally is not the way I would put it. Because, you know, the IRS doesn't fund anything. It just takes more here and takes a little less there from us, from productive businesses. And they're going to make policy choices through the tax code. But at the end of the day, you aren't looking at the IRS to fund this stuff. You're looking at Milo's organization and you're looking at those folks to do it and others. So got to keep that in mind. I guess I wanted to clarify Paul's question and on the numbers here. We have 1,057 shortfall. We have 2390 something goal for next time. Assume for a moment we had hit we had hit the first number and we don't have that 1,057 shortfall. Does that mean if I do the math, I need 1,339 units based on the new numbers, or are we just throwing the 1,057 down memory hole, that 2,700 number we didn't need it? It may not make a difference because I think you get to the same place. But are you saying we need 2,398 new, or do we need 2,398 plus 1,057 by 2020? No.
It's the 2,396, and you are correct. If we had built out, right, if I had
Okay.
under construction and completed, that would have been put into the model and credited, and we would have had less units, right? Because it's about meeting the needs of the people who are chronically homeless. If we have places for them to live,
Okay.
then we don't have to build as many units.
So help me here. I wasn't on this commission back in 2018. How was the 27 or how was the 2396 number determined based on the point in time count? I got a point in time count. It tells me I got X numbers of homeless, a lot more than 2396. Okay. What do you do to massage that to spit out 2396? Because I will tell you what CHD or HCD did, I get my acronyms wrong, at the state level to spit out our arena numbers was nonsense. What do we do to get our numbers out of that point in time count?
Right. So for permanent supportive housing, it's assumed that it's a chronically homeless individual that needs this intervention. So it took a look at the numbers of chronic homeless in the point in time count. And so I'm trying to look up the numbers right now. I think it's on page 6 where they go into the numbers for the count. And it just, I believe, just took the chronic homeless numbers that were needed, and then deducted any you had in the pipeline to get the need of 2396.
Mind if I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
So what we saw was an increase in the percentage of chronically homeless individuals, although we saw a decrease in the overall number. And the way that this number was calculated, I think is worth noting is that there's an understanding, okay, we're focusing, we believe, because of our experience, that permanent supportive housing is best serves chronically homeless individuals, not every homeless individual. So I think there's a consideration to the cost of this and trying to understand that permanent supportive housing isn't the only solution. It's incredibly important. But for those groups that don't fit under chronic homelessness, that's where some of our client choice vouchers come into play. Some of the other options that our system works on to divert them from, permanent supportive housing.
Milo and then Paul.
A little bit, I'm here in my hat as a practitioner of this work, but my urban planning training is kind of screaming on the inside to want to say all sorts of things about the larger supply side aspects of housing not being built for my entire life. And it's going to start to build up, the water kind of pours over the the dike, and we kind of see the consequences today. And in that context, I want to speak a little bit to some of the thoughts here. The problem that I'm trying to solve when I'm trying to build housing as a nonprofit operator, looking at the progress report there, I'm doing math. I'm not sure what's in the exactly, but I think of the 362 that were completed, about a third, about 120 were my nonprofits, housing units in supportive housing. Most of them with regular affordable housing in the same buildings as well. So I can tell you that for me, I don't necessarily look at the conversation. We're always trying to whittle down the cost. You know, we do with modular housing at Casa Paloma, we think we saved about 50,000 per unit in the front analysis. I'm not sure after the utility delays and so forth what that was, but it helped some, some, right? And not large enough to get the scale that Hilton can with modular, So in that context, we try to be as efficient as we can, as thoughtful, and grind those numbers down. But we also have to have that extra elevator. We have to have the neighbors feel like they're glad it was there, so they don't go to the next council meeting and say that was a mess, right? So we do have to spend the money and invest in 100-year infrastructure in an appropriate manner. I think our children ask us to do this because they're going to live with it. And it's not just about the dollar, although I hear you, I understand that. In that context, when I noticed in the report there, it talks about how the County of Orange has a leverage ratio of 5.5 to 1. So we talk about, say, a building that costs $550,000. You're talking about $100,000 in the County of Orange, and then our thoughtful county staff and practitioners trying to leverage outside funding sources, positioning for these waves of funds that are hard to predict. Very high quality staff here at the County of Orange and leadership across the board. I mean, really the county, I think it's very impressive the work that's done. A lot of compliments there that I think are broadly shared. And when you think about that, that's not the problem I'm solving for necessarily in the same way. I can't control what the contractors are gonna do. I can control some things. It's gonna be between 500 and 600 all in. I can't control that. This is what I can control. And I'm gonna give you two ways that everyone here, I think, can help transform what we're doing in support of this great strategy. Thinking about that one of our 5 functions as a commission is to strategize and look for innovation and evidence-based practices to address homelessness. This is innovation and housing construction type. This is in structure and bringing in services and partnering with other agencies, positioning for home key. And it's all proven. It's evidence-based practices. Google it all day long. And in that context, for me, there's 2 things that I think that would help me. Okay, one is I can save you 100,000 per unit right now. I can save all of you 100,000 per unit, every city, every county, because that's how much I pay for land right now. I pay 70 to 110 right now today for land, depending a little bit on site size, but mostly that's what it's penciling out to. It was 70 a couple years ago. It's shifted up now. Hopefully, it's shifting down again. There's a very large amount of county and city-owned land throughout the county that's often discussed and considered. Some of it's online is listed as surplus. And if that were to be integrated into some sort of strategy for being rolled out, if it would be built into some local urban planning conversations involving local stakeholders, you could put out 200 units worth of land available for bid RFP every year for the next 20 years. And what this plan tells us, which may not be obvious if you're watching it, is there's only so much money available per year. There's only so much we can build per year if we're going to hit that 5.5 to 1 ratio. In other words, we don't need to have all the land available tomorrow, but what's our plan? And so I just want to say, if you want to cut off $100,000, I can do that right now. That will free up that land for other developers or operators in the marketplace to compete for that land. I think the second piece for me is less of a numbers conversation and more of just this infrastructure problem from this funding side of these project-based vouchers that county staff were mentioning here. The limited amount of subsidies available is the constraint for us. It's not local politics. It's not real estate land availability. It's not even these numbers per unit. We are projecting out what we can do based on what we think might come. And I want to congratulate the federal government for increasing the funding this year to support the massive cost increase of operating buildings right now, but there wasn't really enough to really increase the number available to us on a going basis, which means we're instead having these more complicated structures, we're stacking money up and drawing it down every year. And so I would just note that for those 2 pieces for me would change the entire dynamics for what we can accomplish, allow us to focus on on the local conversations and go back to focusing as much as possible on construction costs. And, when we talk about I guess this is my lane, but I never know what conversations I'm stepping into when I say certain things, but when we look at the regional housing needs assessment and what's being asked of us, by the state of California, these mandates with all this kind of, muscle behind it. I think there's a proactive response. It's not just about, we're not going to do it or we're going to fight it. Hey, California, why don't you legislate and bring to us subsidies that allow us to hit all your 30 and 50% AMI targets for regional housing needs assessment? Why don't you fight us the subsidies? Because right now, look, we've got a proven here, we've got it shown right here with this projections, and this is all very real. Plenty of demand and interest from these competent local cities and and our county and local developers who are working to get this done, where there is support from the cities, where there is support from the neighbors. California, why don't you hook us up with some project-based subsidies? Why don't you listen to our input on how we're partnering with other services, funding streams to do those wraparound services? And then locally, we can think about how we can make land available. So I just want to just give a feel for how I look at this. I really have to just pause and just say, I think it's so excellent that this strategy being developed in parallel to the Pillar report. And in parallel, I know the community care is also working to develop in parallel these conversations. As we move forward, I think this is a really healthy direction for us, because each year as time goes by, we don't know if we're going to get more or less project-based subsidies or more or less state money. And the more we can have be clear in our mind about how we want to approach these things, the less we're positioning to catch the funds, and much more we are focused on just doing it well so that our children are happy with what we've accomplished. And so I'm happy to invite anyone for tours of our properties to talk about why we pay what we do, what to build it, what's involved with the funding structures. But really, the land, the subsidies are for me the variables that I'm always trying to manage for.
So I guess I want to bring up as mission here, we can identify problems here. That's good, but it also would be useful if we actually had some way to work to try to find solutions to those problems. Because often we leave the meeting knowing there's a problem, but we don't actually have an action plan to say how we're going to actually start to address that problem. Back in 2019, shortly after the point in time count, this commission did kick off some working groups, one on housing that Dan Young chaired for a while, and one on data analysis and a few other working groups. And at the time we built out, actually a model on housing. If we're going to do 2,700 units, et cetera, and what's the capital, what are all the various things that would contribute to that, and what are the variables that we have that we can tweak that actually make a difference in that, and also what does that do to reducing our homelessness as we look at it. And because the home point in time count gives us an inflow rate to homelessness, it gives us at least a rough percentage of where those numbers go that we need to track better. Maybe we'll talk about that later in our count here, but where the exits to that are and how many of them need which kind of housing, and what will 2,700 do? Will we reduce our number in our shelters with 2,700 of these, and 2,700 affordable, et cetera? The first answer was no, we want to increase our increases coming in faster than 2,700 units over that period of time. So the number in our shelters would still go up. But we started modeling, and then we started working. If I need to reduce the cost from 550,000 to 400,000, what would have to change in the cost model that we had? Either the financing, either time. Oftentimes that the projecting takes 2 or 3 years to fund, which pushes costs up and pushes housing out. Or do I have to do can we look at land, as he said? Can we reduce square footage? What can we target different locations? But we as a group started to say we need to start to have something that we can go back to the commission to make some recommendations to act on that can be used based on some work. So I think it would be helpful and productive for this commission to have some working groups who said, when we identify problems like this, that we go, let's start to get a few people together and start to figure out, well, let's make some concrete suggestions that can come back to the commission at a future meeting on how we might tackle those problems. I feel like we failed to do that adequately.
Seems to me this was the discussion that we had in 2019.
Yes. Well, yeah, you sat in on some of the meetings that we had on those working groups. Yeah.
And maybe Doug, you could give that some thought and maybe we can bring that to the next meeting and talk about, how we might organize ourselves in order to assist, and remembering that our purpose is to advise the Board of Supervisors.
Right now, we're raising issues, but we're not advising on solutions, and we need to advise, I think.
Any other?
So I was just going to say, I was going to do a lot of listening, but I guess I'm doing a lot of talking, which I didn't want to do. Pretty contradicting myself, but number one, I want to congratulate the commission in kind of preparing these pillars and setting up these goals. And it really isn't, I think a solution that I'm kind of going to talk about. It's more the issue that you can achieve workforce housing, housing for people who are having a tough time making rent. I'll just give you an example and what would happen in our city. We have about a new construction, 1,000 square foot, 1 bedroom going for $2,500 a month. And that made us realize, given what, our profile of the average working family would have been impossible for them to achieve. And for anybody's son or daughter who graduates from college. I know my son could never achieve that rent. We did achieve, and I think got an A+ for our RENA number. And in addition to, I think, maybe 18 other cities throughout the state. But it can be done because it's not, I think the solution would have been easy to say, well, let's just not do anything. Let's see how we can push people out or displace them to another county or to another area, and it won't be our problem. Or say, let's make it less attractive and let's try to cut down on the quality. I think, whether it's massing, whether it's the design or the materials that you use, I think it has to be signified for anyone, whether it's people that's living inside or living next door. But I do think that this commission that, you all have to seem to, take so much pride in working towards these really, really difficult and complex problems. I think we all have to make sort of a decision. What is the end goal? I mean, do we want to create an environment where people aren't able to stay here in this county because it's just unaffordable? Or is it that we want to try to do our best to try to create some opportunities for them to stay here? And it's not an easy solution because we're working with conditions that are just not favorable. You have people that are right on the verge of becoming houseless and not being able to afford. So these are almost safety net ways. You're investing in making sure that number that makes sense. Doesn't continue to grow. So that's just something that I see is our challenge, but it can be done if there's will, if there's the ability to look at, things creatively and seeing how can we reduce the, the costs and use the land that we're maybe not using for other things. It is the number one goal. And I know I've heard that from colleagues on the board, dealing with this issue of, people experiencing homelessness. It is the goal right now that's facing not just us, but many other counties. I mean, there are declarations of, public emergencies as a result of this. And, maybe that's something that we need to consider. Maybe that'll give us another pathway or maybe another, set of options. But this is something that obviously our residents are struggling with. That's why I think, this commission and the board will struggle with it as well. But I applaud what you all have done in putting this forward. I certainly think it's an important path.
Supervisor. Just respond to that. The supervisor hit the nail on the head, and to me, that's the question 0. Is the board has to establish what those priorities are, so we can work backwards and figure out how to solve those, what to bring to the table. And I mean, that's what, as the elected county board of soups, I'm just looking at the appendix. The county leveraged $152 million county funds, leveraged 933 million of investment funds from the private sector or other sources, and built 2,559 units, of which 2,028 were supportive housing at a cost of $481,000 a unit countywide. So the county did a great job, right? The county did a good job of putting in 152 million and drawing in 933 million. I think it's pretty darn good to attract people. But the number of units to me is really low for that kind of money, right? Because the total cost of all that housing was $1.23 billion. And that's my only point is tell us what the vision is for the county. The vision is everybody in this county should stay here, should be able to live here if they choose to, and what government's responsibility is for that housing. Or whether the board feels government doesn't have that responsibility and it's kind of a marketplace, if you will, although we have legal requirements, I understand. I just feel like backwards. And that's why I think when Julia says, hey, we got to build these units and based upon our funding model that we have in this appendix, we have a shortfall of $1 billion. Well, that's got to come from somewhere. Otherwise, we will never meet our goal. And I'm very uncomfortable with the fact that we have a shortfall and somehow the vision to fulfill the housing requirement is contingent upon figuring out how to find that addition. Or you can't. So that's all I'm saying is the vision I think the vision should be created by the board and then tell us based on the vision of the supervisors. How should we try to give you recommendations on how to create that? But right now we're kind of working backwards to tell you what it should look like. And I think Supervisor Shamiato, I think you just nailed it by saying you have a particular vision and I think the board needs to discuss the vision.
Close this item and suggest Mr. Executive Director, and it could be a very, very good discussion item for next meeting. Maybe rather than having a presentation next meeting, we would just continue this conversation with some specificity. Julia, thank you so much. You really got the conversation going and we appreciate it.
Discouraged. I want to, so much good work is going on. So I just encourage you, and you guys have been fantastic supporters. And it's a regional plan, right? It's for all of so I really appreciate you having me here today.
This commission is here to be helpful and to be supportive of the Board of Supervisors. Let's move on to our action items thing. So that comes. Action items. And Madam Clerk, if you would read the first action.
Move.
And excuse me, the minutes were in your. Thank you very much. All right. So let's move on to item number 4. No, you're not reading that.
Yeah, I'll read the title.
Okay.
And then I'll have to take over, yes. So item 4 under the action items is to nominate and appoint a new chair and vice chair to the Commission to End Homelessness.
We do need a new chair and we need a vice chair for the commission. And so I'm going to explain the process to the commissioners that we'll be using the nomination for chair, vice chair. I'll take any questions and get any comments from the commissioners, and we'll call for any public request to speak. So here's the process we're going to do. We're going to conduct. I will open the floor for all nominations before we call for the vote. Open the floor for nominations before we call for the vote. Nominations can be made for the chair or the vice chair or for both. Each nomination must have a second, and each nominee, if they are here, or hopefully they're here, must accept the nomination. If a nominee declines, then the motion will be considered withdrawn. After all nominations are made and accepted, we will take a vote for each nomination in the order. And the first nomination or slate that receives 10 or more. Affirmative votes will be declared either chair or vice chair. as the case may be. Any questions about the process from the commissioners? Do we have any requests from the public to speak on this process, Madam Clerk? Okay, great. Given that there are no questions and no public comments, I will now open the floor for nominations for the chair, vice chair, or both from the commissioners who are here today. George.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to, in support of our pillars and the creation of the strategy we're working on, I'd like to nominate as the next chair Supervisor Wagner, and as part of, I guess I'm allowed to make 2 nominations for both slots. As vice chair, I'd like to again nominate Dr. Richard Afable.
Is there a second on Supervisor Wagner? I'll second. Supervisor Sarmienti, thank you very much. Do you accept that nomination?
All right, you don't want it. We've had this conversation. You're not interested. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And is there a second on the nomination for Richard Afable?
Second.
And I would accept that as a. Are there any additional nominations from the commissioners? Okay. That was easy. Thank you. So let's take a vote then. Let's vote on the chair, Supervisor Wagner. Madam Clerk, I think you're going to call for a vote. Or is there a roll? We don't have to.
Unless that's the pleasure.
Okay. I'm assuming that there will be no need for that, right?
Well, I mean, the commission still needs to vote to appoint.
Do that right now.
Other than that, I don't need to call individual names.
It's been moved and seconded that Supervisor Don Wagner be the chair going forward, the chair of this commission. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Congratulations, Richard. Thank you, sir. Would you take on the next?
All right, well, let's move now to the vote for the vice chair. The nomination has been made and closed. It is for Dr. Afable. I am looking for acclamation. Let's take a vote. All those in favor of Dr. Afable, signify by saying aye. Any opposition or abstentions? Congratulations, sir. Better hear you. Once you finish.
Close that item. Thank you.
Yes. Action items, 2023 homeless survey recommendations, including approving the 2023 homeless survey methodology and approving the creation of an ad hoc to assist in the data analysis and results of the 2023 homeless survey. And we do not have any requests to speak on this item.
Sure. I want to take, I'd like to take a minute to update the commission on the current status for the 2023 survey. First, I want to point out that the survey ad hoc has met 3 separate occasions. Senior leadership from several Garden Rose, Commissioner Stiles, Commissioner Manners, Commissioner Rose's office. We also have senior leadership from United Way, from Commissioner Port's team. That's throughout these meetings, we've not only been working on creating an initial draft of the survey, we've also had a lot of discussions around methodology and operations. We'll be discussing methodology a little further in a few minutes. The conversations have also talked heavily about, I want to list one additional member, of that ad hoc group, and that's from Commissioner Spitzer's office as well, and Ms. Price. So this group has really focused on the operations of this particular survey, also around how can cities and nonprofit providers partner and be valuable in this process to make sure we're bringing along the community in the right way. I think I want to continue to emphasize, although we are doing this, one can say in the replacement of a 2023 point time count, this is a survey and not a census. So there will not be a number that comes out of this. This is for feedback and gratification. Other things that I want to mention is that the Board of Supervisors on February 7th approved the contract with CityNet to be our project lead for this activity in the survey. So another sort of important distinction from the survey and the point in time count is that, and we'll talk about it a little further in our methodology, that this is going to happen over the course of a month. Through CityNet and key professional partners, they will conduct these surveys. And in contrast to the point in time count, where it's a large volunteer activity that happens over the course of really 3 days or 1 week. As I mentioned in the previous slide, our office, the ad hoc group, has met several times, and we're currently circulating a draft amongst that ad hoc, the draft of the survey amongst the members of that. For this commission to working towards creating a survey that's not only concise, but also gets us the critical feedback we are seeking to help create and advise on policy that's going to impact and improve our system. Our focus on this survey continues to be better understanding, gaining a better understanding of the individuals experiencing the most chronic street homelessness. We want to understand, we want to achieve an understanding of their experience in the system. What are potential changes or adjustments to our system that could potentially be made that would increase the likelihood of this group to accept services? And I just want to yet again remind or point out that the focus of this survey are individuals who've been out on the street the longest, and there's a real understanding that most of these individuals have been offered services before and have turned them down. So getting a better understanding of, okay, are there things that we could adjust our system that would all of a sudden turn your no into a yes? And then also understanding the specific service they are interested in. Our other focus is gaining information about individuals' ties, not just to Orange County, which we do measure that through the point in time count, but to particular cities and how that impacts the way our service system is able to serve these folks. How can we increase access? One thing I want to point out about the draft of the survey is that we will be capturing or attempting to capture name and date of birth for each person we survey. It won't be required, but what we've heard from CityNet and other groups we've done surveying in the past is that gaining that information, they believe that most folks are going to give that. The reason I point that out is as in April, as we present our survey, one of the things that I think rightfully so the ad hoc and several groups have mentioned is there's a whole lot of questions we want to ask, but like with any group, there's at one point or another people stop answering questions. So we have to be really thoughtful about the questions we ask. Having that name and date of birth will allow us to potentially look at their information in our databases to potentially yield additional indicators. So there are questions that potentially don't have to ask on the survey if we have that information, allowing us space to ask other questions. With that being said, we see here up on the screen, we're structuring the survey in basically 4 sections. Demographics, current living situations, community ties, and barriers and challenges. Under current living situation, we are targeting individuals that are chronically street homeless, going out and doing that, and that will be a very high majority of folks that we engage with. But we do understand that there's a chance that when we're doing this, we run into folks that are either in shelter at the moment or at risk of homelessness. So we are ensuring that we have an opportunity to capture data. So here in front of us today is 2023 survey methodology. I'm going to walk through in their packet. Their over some points. This will be something we've heard already for the spirit. The survey will be conducted in the spring and canvass the entire geographic area of Orange County. Will be done in 30-day time period. Target population for the survey, like I said, is unsheltered individuals as defined by the 2023 survey we implemented by CityNet, utilizing a stratified sample of at least 20% of the number of unsheltered persons counted during our 2022 point in time homeless count, which is approximately 608 individuals. 600 surveys. CityNet, part of their scope, our 2022 point in time count survey maps, so that we best know hotspot locations and where to expect to find individuals experiencing homelessness. They will be completing the survey in 30-day time frame and will cover the entire geographic area of Orange County, with time and emphasis placed on spot and/or set. That we're not going to go out and survey the first 600 people that have to come from this outside our office here. We're going to do our best to get some type of geographic equity. We have our 2020 point time count that breaks down the numbers by region and by city. So methodology will take into account and aim to get 20% of the representative sample in each one of those areas. CityNet will use our GIS Survey 123 app to complete the surveys electronically for those of you that account. This is the process, and then they'll also be reporting very closely their findings and analysis and recommending recommendations and next steps. So the action item is to second piece is creation of last meeting for the results of a 2023 survey. So current ad hoc is focused on developing the survey, developing the methodology. The ad hoc that we're on today is a separate ad hoc that will be focused on reviewing the results and bringing forward to the commission potential policy recommendations. And so he's responsible for. That is the process of the. We're not. Absolutely. We're seeking to, first on our ad hoc group, we have, from Ms. Rose's office, we have her senior leadership as part of the ad hoc group to help create the survey. And then in terms of conducting the survey, yes, CityNet, our office, will be ensuring that surveys are conducted throughout the county on a basically proportionate basis. Yes, the app that they have and has several different languages on it. I can get an answer to, the specific answer to that. They also have staff that speak several different languages, specifically those that are most popular here in Orange County. Absolutely. I think one of the advantages of having CityNet is not only their significant outreach experience and portfolio, both of the county and specific cities here in Orange County, but they have a specific department that does surveys and censuses year round up and down Southern California. So yeah, we appreciate their attention to detail. The questions very much like yours to ensure that we are sending the right people to the right place.
Is the survey done in a way that
CityNet or their professional partners will be asking the questions. What's the method? Why are you separating that? It's the reason I ask is you're sitting there, you've spent
I was assuming that CityNet would be on the ad hoc to make that continuity.
So there's two pieces. CityNet's contract starts March 15th. So as we've consulted with them to some degree these last couple of weeks, but they eventually come on board. Specifically, suggesting to okay, we're seeing some time. There hasn't been as much. This provides a opportunity to ensure that we were focusing on the back end to analyze that. Feels awkward. The membership that we're seeking doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I notice when I do calling it my own campaign, we develop insight into answers, because most of the time when you're a candidate, you're perplexed by the results. So there's something that's honest, this is one of those areas as we go forward, you know, I'll speak for myself in my office, sort of learning, because there is sort of that awkwardness. The ad hoc group is there and is created to talk about operations and create the survey. When we discussed in our last meeting this component, I stand behind it, but we see the awkwardness of if we were to not covering certain areas, undercounting certain, like, we are so open to criticism that both the model and the methodology was wrong. And all I would just ask is that whoever is, like, there's plenty of UCI and other people who do these kinds of things, field surveys, you should probably ask them what the best model is, so that I don't want to get criticized because the model that set up wasn't kind of scientifically standardized. This is the professional service we're paying for through CityNet. CityNet, is that what they do? Are they survey particular arm of their work is dedicated and specific to conducting surveys? Right, but they're not on till 3:15. So have we inquired of them if what we're doing on the front end is appropriate for the back end? Yes, and that's why we are waiting to bring the survey to this group in our April meeting. Okay. Okay. All right, that's helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And a motion to approve. Thank you, Chief. So we move. Moved and any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. So moved. Thank you so much. Madam Clerk, would you read the next item?
Yes, item 6 on the action item is approval of the appointments of Marcella Reed Spouse and Robert Morris to the continuing of care board representing the seat on this commission for the term of February 16, 2023, February 16, 2023. We have no request from the public to speak on this item.
Okay, Doug, you want to give some clarification on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So our bylaws, we are a 20-member commission. 2 of those members are brought on are representatives of our COC board, our local continuum of care board. They're also non-voting members. What happens each year is the continuum of care board reviewed groups such as this and makes a recommendation on the individuals they feel that best represent the COC board for a particular effort like the Commission to End Homelessness. With that being said, the 2 members that that the COC has pushed forward for approval from the Commission to join is Marcella Reed Spouse, who is the CEO of Human Options. She has served on our COC board for several years. She's just cycling out of being first the vice chair of the COC board and then the chair of the board. And she has over 30 years of experience working with vulnerable populations, including folks experiencing homelessness. Mr. Robert Morris joined the COC board this January as an at-large representing for older adults. Mr. Morris comes to the COC board and a tremendous amount of experience, both serving on boards and on committees. But he also brings his experience and his expertise from being someone who has experienced homelessness. He served as a provider director for 5 years. And we have them here. They've attended today's meeting. I'm not going to ask them to speak, but if you want to just sort of give a wave, and if they're confirmed in, they'll attend next meeting as a member, and we'll allow them space to introduce themselves. That being said, I'll hand it back to you.
And Mr. Morris, being here, for your willingness to and assist us as a commission. Conversation, any questions? Good. The order to leave it recommended. Very good. For a second. Okay. Okay, just a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. And welcome to the commission. Good, okay, great, thank you, thank you. Well, that concludes our agenda items for today. We have 2 additional items. One is public comment as well as commissioner comments. At this time, we'll take any general comments from any members of the public who would speak on any non-agenda topics that are under the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak?
Yes, we have one request to speak to each other. The speaker is Charles.
Yes.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. My name is Charles Young. I first wanted to thank you for all the hard work you guys are doing. Not easy, so I really appreciate it. I've been a city planner at the city of Anaheim since 2016. There's not
Okay. But today I'm here before you as a graduate student at Cal Poly Pomona. I'm looking to finish my master's thesis and I'm working on supportive housing specifically. I actually wanted to comment on the discussion earlier on justifying costs for supportive housing. If you recall, in 2017, UCI did a study talking about the cost effectiveness of PSH units by providing a supportive housing unit to a single person determined as chronically homeless. Service utilization costs, which are cycling between justice, health, and other social service departments, dropped from $100,000 roughly to about $50,000 a year. For the top 10% of those who are chronically homeless, that cost savings was dropped from $439,000 per year down to $55,000 annually. So when we factor in these cost savings for supportive housing units, you could argue that the cost for developing units is less of a sticker shock. Excuse me, a little bit under the weather today. In 1999, a report entitled Homelessness Programs and the People They Serve analyzed the availability of homeless assistance programs and the needs of people experiencing homelessness across the nation. This was the earliest academic study that I could find that looked at characterizing different providers, services, and needs. A portion of that study analyzed the components of supportive housing. In 2017, there was a systematic study done assessing services and providers specifically on supportive housing. This was done by Dr. Benjamin Henwood, a team of researchers at USC. This was within the vicinity of Skid Row in Los Angeles. I am fortunate to have Dr. Benjamin Henwood on my thesis committee. That is an advisor to my thesis. And he is an expert on supportive housing services specifically and has written several papers on supportive housing. In the literature review that I've done so far, the only other systematic study assessing supportive housing that I could find was sponsored by Urban Institute in 2018.
This was entitled Supportive Housing Organizational Capacity Assessment Tool. And this included developing an instrument to measure organizational capacity to develop and operate high quality supportive housing. So those 3 studies are the 3 that I'm modeling for my thesis to analyze how our community is implementing supportive housing. Can I ask for a couple more seconds?
Please, why don't you finish? Thank you.
So today's agenda packet provided some information on supportive housing, but it didn't indicate any inventory of services. I know we talked about like the cost of supportive housing services, but there wasn't as much information here. And so this is where my thesis comes into play. I want to look at how we're implementing the supportive services throughout the county. And I do want to thank Zulima Lundy with the Office of Care Coordination for previously providing a list of projects I can go look and survey. But I do need some additional support. I would like to discuss with any commission members after the meeting who may have information on other staff referrals or insight on data to supportive housing in the county. So with that, thank you for the time. I look forward to working with the county.
Thank you very much, Charles. Good luck in your thesis.
Thank you.
We have no further requests to speak.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any comments from the commission? Any comments?
Thank you. Let me start with George, Ms. Searcy, Commissioner, thank you for the nomination, and to all of you for the vote. I appreciate the opportunity to serve as chairman. As all of you know, I'm not shy about sharing my thoughts. Sometimes they're out of step with others, but I view the role of chairman as facilitating the opportunity for all of you to share your views and get your voice, the voice of your constituents heard. And so I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and will approach it with that in mind. I want to thank Doug Chafee for the years he spent on this commission. And he did ask me to appoint someone else and let him step back and pursue other interests and give an opportunity for someone to have a new and fresh voice. And Supervisor Sarmiento, thank you, stepped up without any hesitation whatsoever. So I guess I'm done. No. So anyway, so welcome, Vincent. We do appreciate you being here and your willingness to jump into this with both feet. Real quick, a little bit of good news. One of the things my office has done, and done it with the help of HCA, Dr. Chow is here, or he was, I think he maybe just ducked out. We've made available, not quite the last month, gift cards for some of the folks that our O&E team runs into, interacts with. Them, they're small amounts, but as thank yous for going and making your doctor, making your going and getting whatever help you've been saying, oh, I'll do it eventually, going and getting it done. And I have an email from Dr. Chow, and I'll read it to you. Those are some of the numbers, and it's been successful. Curiously, about 10 times more successful, not by 10 times more successful, is when we give them help for their kids. Dog food, food bowls, cat food. It is amazing they can do for their pets what they won't do so much for themselves. I want to thank our own team, HCA, for their work in the community, just getting these folks on. The stories are quite powerful. And so I'm just going to give a shout out to Dr. Chow's team. He's dug down, but again, good work is being done, and I appreciate all of you keeping on this moving forward. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments from?
Vice Chair, it's my pleasure to have nominated you. Thank you for the recognition. I would also just like to offer the comment. I didn't want to bring this up in the discussion because I'm not really at this moment interested in a debate about the question of the cost of housing or what are the methods or strategies that we should consider to reduce that? But I would like to say, just for the chair, the vice chair and staff, should we be interested in diving into the data on these questions, the Turner Center for Housing Innovation, led by Director Ben Metcalf, is I think, a recognized expert and authority on both the question of what constitutes the cost of especially housing in California. What are the drivers? I think I know Milo and myself and probably every city or county staff person around the table that deals with housing can testify that people frequently have a wide range of objections to why housing should not be built or developed in their neighborhood. Very seldom, in my experience, do people actually reference any actual data. And so I think if we're interested in that, and if it's valuable to our strategy, the Center for Housing Innovations, Director Metcalf would be a great source to educate us about A, what are the drivers of the actual costs in California to develop such housing, and B, what issues are emerging. I know Milo has done modular housing, others are doing tiny homes, and others are doing a variety of other strategies. If it's useful, I think both of those education components can be influenced with from that source. So thank you.
So thank you for that. Great. Other comments, Commissioner? All right, hearing none, that concludes this meeting of the Commission to End Homelessness. We are now adjourned. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be held Monday, April 19th, 2023 at 1 p.m. Thank you.
It's good to accept.
Yeah.
I do, but